I've always felt very welcome here. I'm myself Italian, I live in Britain, I've traveled quite a lot, I go to conferences around the world and so on, but whenever I'm invited to Romania, I usually accept. In fact, I'm coming here again soon in a month's time for a film festival, and may come back here again early next year. And I always feel very welcome and very well, very generously treated. I don't think there is a single definition of identity, but it has to do with who we feel we are in a particular context. And I would emphasize in a particular context because we are not the same person in different contexts. The question is rather where our sense of origin, where our sense of identity originates from. And I would suggest that at least in part it originates from early on in our life, in our childhood, through our identification with different important characters in our life. So inevitably there is an identification with one's parents, with one's siblings, maybe with one's teachers, with anybody who's been important, and that provides some kind of a core identity which we carry with us all our lives. But then, of course, we have to adjust that depending on the social and cultural circumstances in which we find ourselves. There should be, or there normally is, a core identity, meaning an internal stable in time and stable in place. So wherever you are, even if you wear a mask, there is still a sense of identity that you carry through with you. However, if that is weakened because of our past experiences or current circumstances, and that core identity begins to crumble, and all you're left with is a mask, but with nothing behind it, then I think you really risk some kind of a psychological breakdown. But normally there is still something of ours. Come across in my work with films, for instance, with many actors who constantly have to wear a mask, quite literally so, because of their job. They have to be Richard II, or they have to be, that particular character. And so their sense of identity is constantly challenged, because when they are on stage or when they are in front of a camera, they really have to be someone else. At the same time, they have also to retain something about themselves. They're not just the actor playing a part, they are themselves the actor, not the actor in a role. So that would be perhaps a rather extreme example of someone who has to wear a mask, but as we were saying, everybody has anyway, possibly including myself now making this recording, and I'm probably different than when I'm having dinner with my friends, to some extent, and yet I feel it's still me, both when having dinner with my friends and when talking to you. I think a lot of who we are is unconscious, and so it's not something we control by deciding who we want to be. To some extent it is, of course, but to a large extent it's already determined by something that happens in our unconscious mind, and which has, I go back to what I was saying earlier, goes back to very early times in our lives and in our development, and that's where some fundamental unconscious components become part of our sense of identity, and over them we have no control. So whether that would still feel authentic in a sense, but it's not entirely under our conscious control.